Well, thank you all for being here. This is an exciting day for Jeanne Shaheen and me because for the last few months we've been hoping to introduce our legislation on energy efficiency that we've worked on for years. But we wanted to go through a process, and that was to talk to all the stakeholders, talk to our colleagues, two of whom are here today who we really value, Joe Manchin and Susan Collins. Thank you for being here and your strong support of this from the start and the great contributions you've made to the legislation. But we wanted to be sure this year, as we reintroduced the legislation, that we took all the best ideas that we could find around the country. And I think we've done that. And I think you'll see that once again, we're going to have an energy efficiency bill that can pass the committee with a strong vote, as we have done in the past. You know, this bill typically gets out of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee with a vote of 19 to 3 or 18 to 4. And then we've been able to take it to the floor of the United States Senate and get strong votes as well. I think the last vote was 87 votes in favor. The reason this bill is popular is because even in a partisan town like this, the environment, and particularly climate change, is even more partisan. And yet this legislation defies that because, I think, we've kept it nonpartisan from the start, but also because it does something really important. It improves the environment, but also improves the economy. It's the sweet spot. It's where Republicans and Democrats can come together and say, okay, we may disagree on some other approaches, including some regulatory approaches and some approaches that might affect jobs. But in this case, we have legislation that's actually going to make our economy stronger, at the same time improve our environment, and have some other benefits that you're going to hear about today from some of my colleagues. We hope that we have the same success we've had in the past in getting it through the committee and through the floor, but we hope we have even more success than we've had in the past in terms of the House side. There is a companion bill, as you know, in the House. We're excited about that. In the past, we've been able to get about 25 to 30% of the legislation through the House, and we're appreciative of that. And there's some people here who were very involved in Tenant and other issues that were in our original legislation. But this time, we believe it's a little different. The environment has changed, and therefore, we think we have a chance of not just succeeding in the Senate, but also succeeding in the House. I mentioned some of the changes we've made. It improves a number of things in the legislation, new resources to states to implement their updated building codes, expands the industrial assessment centers we had at our universities, particularly to help smaller businesses in the manufacturing sector. For the first time, it formally authorizes the Department of Energy's FEMP program. This is really important. This is the program that allows federal agencies to reduce their energy use, but also it's great for taxpayers because essentially companies are paid back for the energy savings that they can make in our federal buildings through performance contracts. It also retains the basic goals we've had in the past, which is buildings, residential and commercial buildings, more energy efficiency there. About 40% of energy is used there, so it's a huge opportunity, great potential. Second is the manufacturing sector, and you'll hear from some of our colleagues in manufacturing today. Again, enormous potential here to have the United States be a more efficient economy, which helps in terms of the environment, but also makes us more competitive globally. And then finally, the federal government, the biggest user of energy in the entire country, and we believe in the entire world. And as you can imagine, there's some opportunities here. Senator Manchin is going to talk, I hope, about his legislation with Senator Hoeven to reduce energy consumption in federal buildings by 20% by 2027. Really excited about having that in the bill again, Joe, and thanks for all your hard work on that over the years. So there's a number of things in here that are going to be important to making the economy more efficient as well as making our energy use more effective and more efficient. We believe that the building code section alone will result in about a $13 billion per year saving to consumers and will be the equivalent in terms of the emission savings of taking about 11 million cars off the road within the space of about 15 years. Just that provision alone. There's another provision called the SAVE Act that many of you know about, and I hope Jeff's going to talk about that and others, but it's a voluntary measure to take into account energy efficiency improvements with regard to the mortgage underwriting for federally backed mortgages. It's really revolutionary. It will help a lot in terms of energy efficiency in the residential sector. That provision alone is the equivalent of reducing emissions, carbon emissions, by 7 million metric tons. We're taking 1.5 million cars off the road during that 15-year period. And again, saving the consumers billions of dollars. So we're excited about this legislation being reintroduced and the opportunity we have here to come together as Republicans and Democrats to get something done that's really important for our environment and our economy. Thank you for being here. The Alliance to Save Energy, Jason, for your involvement from the start and helping us get co-sponsors and getting this done. We got, by the way, a bunch of new co-sponsors today already. Thanks to the Real Estate Roundtable and Jeff for you being here. Johnson Controls is here. Thanks for being here, Mark. Cal Dooley's here again with the American Chemistry Council. I told him he can never retire. And the U.S. Chamber is here. Chris, thank you for being here, and others who you'll hear from. So anyway, this is an opportunity for us to do something good for our country on a bipartisan basis. And I can't tell you what a pleasure it's been to work with Senator Shaheen on this over the years. In fact, in 2015, when we passed this legislation, I think it was called Shaheen-Portman. If it wasn't then, it was called Shaheen-Portman before that. It's been Portman-Shaheen, Shaheen-Portman through the years because we've always worked as partners, and we'll continue to. And love to hear from Jeanne Shaheen now.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. And I share your enthusiasm for the partnership that we've developed on energy efficiency. Actually, when we first introduced this legislation, Rob had black hair.
It's true.
Sorry. It's been a long time. Also very much appreciate Senator Collins and Senator Manchin for your continued support and all of the advocates who are here. Most of you were here when we introduced this legislation the first time in 2011. So I'm told that the fourth time is a charm. So I'm looking forward to getting this done because, as Senator Portman has said, it does take a number of provisions that we've heard from people who have worked on energy efficiency issues over the years, and we've tried to include those as well as what had been in the bill when we initially introduced it. So we're all on board to try and get this done in this session of Congress. Now, we can clap for that. That's good. All of you in the audience. And over the last couple of years, the Senate has made incremental progress on energy efficiency issues. In 2015, President Obama signed a targeted energy efficiency bill that Senator Portman and I introduced. I think we were up until about 4 in the morning trying to get that through the floor of the Senate. And then in 2016, the Senate passed a version of the legislation that we're introducing today. But it got bogged down when it got to the House. But it shows the kind of broad bipartisan support and the agreement on energy efficiency that exists. I always talk about efficiency as being the cheapest, fastest way to address our energy needs, and as a way to do it that can engage everybody, whether you live in the Northeast, as I do, in the Midwest, Senator Portman, whether you're in the far West or the South, whether you support fossil fuels or alternatives, efficiency is something that we can all agree on. And this legislation is urgently needed because buildings consume approximately 40% of the energy in the United States. When fully implemented, as Senator Portman has said, just the provision that deals with building codes will save consumers about $13 billion a year and cut carbon emissions by the equivalent of taking 11 million cars off the road. And I know I'm repeating Senator Portman, but I think those statistics are worth repeating. Those kinds of energy savings continue throughout the other provisions of the bill. The new bill would also establish long-term energy and water efficiency goals for the federal government that will help save taxpayers millions of dollars and allow us to work, as I said, in a way that helps us address climate change in a way that all of us can agree on. This bill is a way to make significant progress on reducing carbon emissions and grow our economy in a bipartisan way. So I think let's take this step together. People across the country want to see us work together to address our needs. Our energy needs are at the top of that list, especially on a day like today when it's so hot and we're talking about rolling blackouts in parts of the country. Making sure that we are as efficient as possible, that we save as much energy as we can is critical. So again, thank you everyone for your participation, and I look forward to hearing from Senator Collins.
Thank you. Well, first, let me congratulate the bill's chief sponsors, Senator Portman and Senator Shaheen, for their extraordinary leadership in reintroducing this common sense bipartisan bill. It's always a great pleasure to work closely with my dear friend, Senator Joe Manchin, as well. Encouraging the adoption of energy efficiency measures is one of the easiest yet most effective mechanisms for reducing energy consumption, lessening pollution, and ultimately saving families, businesses, and the federal government money. There are a lot of different ideas about what we should do to combat climate change. Surely we ought to be able to come together and get this bill enacted and signed into law, because it puts forth the goal of increased energy efficiency that everyone should be able to endorse. I'm pleased that way back in 2011, I was an original co-sponsor of this bill, and I've supported it in each subsequent Congress. This is the year that I am convinced that we can get it signed into law. Maine has already made excellent progress using energy efficiency projects, including programs from Energy Maine that have provided more than $1 billion in energy savings to families and businesses since 2002. So I know firsthand that this can work, whether it's installing heat pumps, weatherizing homes, improving insulation, sealing drafty attics. These kinds of measures work. And at the national level, legislation to improve our energy policy is long overdue. I just want to comment on two particular provisions of the bill. First, I'm very pleased that legislation that I introduced with Senator Mark Warner to provide a better process for schools to help them better navigate all of the federal energy efficiency programs and financing options has been included in this bill. And second, as chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee with jurisdiction over the Department of Housing and Urban Development, I am very pleased to see the creative financing proposal for multifamily housing that would encourage investment in energy efficiency programs and projects, which will help us reduce the costs of those very important subsidized housing. So I'm pleased that this bill would have such an impact and has support from such a broad group of stakeholders. Let's getting it done. Thanks.
Well, there's not much left to say because they have truly led the way for so many years. Let me just say, for the tenacity that Jeanne and Rob have had all these years and haven't given up, speaks volumes of why this needs to be done. And to have Susan and all of us working together. What we're dealing with is basically low-hanging fruit. If we can't get this done, God help us on climate change, to do the common sense things that we can do. And change is not going to come by elimination. It's going to come by innovation. That's how you're going to do change. And I think this leads the way in that. And when you look at just yesterday, we reported 8 energy efficiency bills out of in our Energy Committee, which I'm ranking member on and working with. And this was part of that package coming out. And we hope to put an omnibus bill together. We think it can work. And it's a way to do it and move it forward. We're listening to all stakeholders. I've heard some concerns, and I want them to know that we're listening to them too, to make sure that their challenges and basically their fears are answered. All of the above Federal Building Energy Conservation Act, which John Hoven and I have reintroduced again. And basically what it does, it puts certain guidelines on all renovations or all buildings of federal buildings, that they have to meet certain guidelines. We take away the crazy provision which never been implemented to quit using fossil, because if fossil can't meet certain regulations, it can't be used anyway. If it can, then it's going to be the most cost effective. The market will drive it. Just common sense approach to basically how we should be solving these problems. The Federal Energy and Water Management Performance Act, I introduced that with Senator Murkowski, authorizes the Federal Energy Management Program for the first time at $36 million. We've not been there before. We've been at 30. And we were able to hold the line on that. Then we had an amendment or so on that. We had good discussion. and people thought we needed to move forward. That has saved over $50 billion in energy cost. That's a pretty good investment, return on investment, I would think. So only thing I can do is say to Jeanne and Rob and to Susan and everybody else and all the industries here, this is something that we must do. And if we can't get past this hurdle, we've got a long way to go. So I think that this could be the year, Jeanne. And Rob, yeah? I don't know, you can't get any grayer, but other than that, buddy, we're gonna wear you out.
We got to do it.
But thank you all, appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. All right, you can see we have a number of people to talk here today, and I want to make one general point, which is this is, again, a rare opportunity for the environmental community and the business community to work closely together, and representing the Alliance to Save Energy is Jason Harkey.
Thanks, Senator Portman. Good afternoon. Jason Harkey, the Alliance to Save Energy. I was one of the folks who was waiting over there at the swamp, and I'm glad cooler minds prevailed and we headed over here. I want to start by commending Senator Portman and Senator Shaheen once again for their tremendous leadership in energy efficiency policy. We're so grateful for their tireless work, their commitment to bipartisanship, and their perseverance on this critical legislation. I like the word that Senator Manchin said, though, tenacity. A lot of tenacity around this bill. I'd also like to thank Senator Collins and Senator Manchin for their important leadership and their steadfast support. This is such a great day for energy efficiency, and we wouldn't be here without this resolute group of legislators. And at the Alliance, we work every day to advance energy efficiency because we realize that it helps strengthen the economy, it helps a cleaner environment, and it helps secure greater energy security and affordability. And that's exactly what this legislation helps accomplish. It represents a unique opportunity to move much faster on energy efficiency, and in doing so, boost economic opportunity, create jobs, put people to work in their communities, all while helping address climate change. And I'm proud that the Alliance has been there since day one and all along the course of this legislation's journey. It's great to see Portman Shaheen back and better than ever. Now's the time, as they've said, now's the time to get this done, get it across the finish line. Because this bill would lead to better building energy codes. It would help states and localities train builders and code officials to ensure more efficient new homes. It would ensure the invisible benefits of energy efficiency are properly valued so homeowners realize a fair return on investment when they make those precious energy efficiency improvements. As Senator Collins said, it would support school efficiency. It would make the industrial and manufacturing sectors more energy efficient, and it would make sure, as Senator Manchin said, that the federal government is a leader and continuing to lead by example across the federal building stock. This is really signature energy efficiency policy. So thanks again to these senators and their commitment to energy efficiency. And thanks to all those other groups and organizations that have been involved. This has been a huge collaborative team effort, and we look forward to doing all we can to make sure that this legislation passes. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Jeff?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Senators. Let me just start by, I guess, associating myself with his remarks about the appreciation for your work, Senators, on this. It's very, very important.
Thank you for your work.
My name's Jeff DeBoer. I'm the president of the Real Estate Roundtable. We're delighted to support this legislation. Roundtable members, just for a little background, own about 12 billion square feet of office and retail space in America, about 2 million apartments and about 3 million hotel rooms. The issue of these are the buildings that house America's businesses, they house America's workforce. And energy efficiency in our buildings has long been a priority. For example, if you go back to 2003, since that time, we've had building stock in America increase by 14%. The commercial floor space increased by 22%, but the amount of energy consumed in building has actually only increased about 7% during that time period. And that's because building owners have integrated energy efficient construction and management practices into their new buildings. and they've installed energy-efficient retrofits in existing buildings. Equally important, owners have been encouraging now tenants, business tenants, to adopt energy-efficient protocols, something that was part of the legislation that you mentioned, Senators, that was accomplished in the last Congress. We're very appreciative of that, and it helps drive what tenants, who really, it's not buildings that use energy, it's tenants, so we need tenants to be listening. So we're proud of what has been done, but we know that a lot more needs to be done. And particularly as the economy has changed, business demands of energy has changed, we need to do more. And that's why we're supporting this bill. We think smart public policy can help accomplish it. This is a smart bill. It's an innovative bill. It's forward-looking. Let me just highlight a couple of things that some things that other people are talking about, but things that we're focused on here. Requires the Energy Department to consider cost and small business impacts when they develop their model energy codes, which are very important. It retains the leadership role and gives the diversity for the geographies to control actual building codes in their states and localities with the direction from the feds. It encourages real estate appraisers, and this is very important, to factor energy-efficient investments into their building valuations. And importantly, the bill requires greater coordination between EPA and DOE to gather reliable, high-quality data on energy that is actually consumed by the tenants and the buildings. So America's building owners look forward to continuing to achieve greater energy efficiency. We look forward to supporting public policy like this bill that will help enable building owners to respond to the needs as businesses change, as the workforce changes, and as demands for energy change. We want to be there at the forefront to make sure our buildings are energy efficient. There are actions that are good for the economy. These are actions, and this bill is something that's good for the economy, as has been mentioned here, and it's good for our planet. And we're happy to be supporting it, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about the building stock in America and how we can do a better job and continue on the forward motion that we have. Thank you, Senators, for what you're doing. Thank you.
Johnson Controls. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. I'm Mark Wagner with Johnson Controls. We make buildings safe, smart, and sustainable. I want to thank Senators Portman, Shaheen, as well as Senator Collins and Manchin for their leadership in this bipartisan legislation. Let me highlight just a few provisions, some of it have already been mentioned, that we strongly support. The bill will make our federal buildings more efficient, save energy and water, and taxpayer dollars while creating jobs. Our elementary and secondary schools throughout the country will have assistance needed to make those energy retrofits they need so badly, and will not only save local tax dollars, but give students a better learning environment. It'll provide our post-secondary institutions with training assistance, so companies like Johnson Controls and others will have the skilled workforce that we need to install energy-saving systems in our commercial and public buildings. Our factories will have help to improve their operations and become more efficient, productive, and profitable. And finally, as it's been said, the Department of Energy's Federal Energy Management Program, known as FEMP, will be permanently authorized to ensure the success of these and many other initiatives included in this bill. These are just a few of the significant provisions in this legislation, and I want to thank you for letting me join you today in support of this important legislation.
Thank you. Okay, Cal, you're up.
I'm Cal Dooley. I'm President and CEO of the American Chemistry Council, and Senator Portman and Senator Shaheen, we thank you for your current and past leadership, and Senator Collins, we thank you for all the work you've done on these issues. Maybe to paraphrase a statement Abraham Lincoln made, he said, what is the appropriate role of government is to do for people what they would like to have achieved, but cannot do so in their separate and individual capacities. And when I look at this piece of legislation, it is really a classic example of that. What person, what homeowner, what CEO of a manufacturing operation doesn't want to see enhanced energy efficiency? What constituency in the United States doesn't want to see a reduction in emissions? Everybody wants to see that happen. And this legislation is really what I also am so appreciative of. It doesn't take a heavy-handed regulatory approach. It really takes a light touch that will catalyze individuals as well as the public sector, as well as private sector constituencies to take action to make investments that will enhance the energy efficiency of our built environment, of our office buildings, of the factories that we all work in. And as representing the chemical industry, we're very proud of the contributions and innovations that we are making to enhance the energy efficiencies of our built environment. The insulations that deliver such savings. When you look at the new refrigerants that are coming into play that makes our air conditioning so much more efficient, that are playing a critical role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This legislation takes, again, I think that appropriate approach for the government to really catalyzing these investments that are going to deliver significant benefits. And I just really want to thank all of you for really ensuring. I actually saw Chris Dodd on the way in here, one of your former colleagues, and I said, we're going to a bipartisan bill introduction. And he said, that doesn't happen too often. It's unfortunate, but I really want to compliment you on your terrific work.
Yeah. Thanks, Cal. Appreciate it. All right, Christopher, you're up. I thought you were hiding out.
Trying not to hide out too much. Hi, I'm Christopher Guth, the acting president of the Global Energy Institute at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And I'm excited to be here today to once again endorse the Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act. The Chamber specifically would like to commend Senators Portman and Shaheen for your leadership, your dedication, and as has been said, your perseverance on an issue of great importance to the business community. As Senator Manchin referenced, like the 22 bills reported out of Energy and Natural Resources yesterday, the Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act demonstrates that contrary to conventional wisdom, there is significant bipartisan support for legislative action to address climate change. Increasing energy efficiency means greater output with less input. Frankly, doing more with less. And reducing energy consumption translates to reduced emissions of air pollutants as well as greenhouse gases. This legislation will help continue to increase energy efficiency at industrial and manufacturing facilities, commercial and residential buildings, and of course throughout the federal government. Concurrently reducing emissions and operational costs is a win-win for business. This legislation continues to be an important step to take at the federal level, and the Chamber strongly supports its enactment. And thank you also, Senator Collins, for your continued support, and thank you for including the Chamber today.
Thanks, Christopher. Questions, comments? Yes.
I'm wondering if you've spoken to the majority leader about getting floor time for this, and also what steps you're taking to avoid what happened in 2013 when I think David Bitter held this up for weeks over a vote that he won on health care.
Yeah. Well, what happened in 2013 had nothing to do with energy efficiency, as you recall. And I remember having...
Senator Vitter is gone.
Yeah, exactly. It had to do with, members' payment on health care, and I had a number of spirited conversations with my colleague at that time about it. But no, I think the majority leader would be interested in moving this legislation. We got to get it through committee again first, which I'm confident we will based on the past votes. And based on what we saw yesterday in committee, there's an interest in efficiency right now, maybe even more so than there was back in 2011 when we first introduced it. So I'm not in conversations with him about floor time yet because we got to go through the first process first, but we'd like to get it done this year. Jeanne, you want to say that?
I think you said it all. Yeah.
I just wonder on the issue of the regulatory approach versus a lot of the guidance. There's some money, for example, to provide local code officials, who from municipalities that are interested in this. Is there any regulatory element in the bill at this point that creates some type of federal mandate or other mandate on government or business?
The building codes are voluntary because we thought that was an approach that had a greater likelihood of getting support, and we wanted this bill to pass. There are some requirements for the federal government in terms of the centers, the technology centers that would help us train workers. But I think if you're talking about regulations as we think about, have thought historically about regulations in terms of the building industry, I think those do not exist in the legislation.
Let me reference, I see these guys back here. Leading Builders is here today, which is one of the home builder groups representing about, I think, 40% of all homes in America that are built, including maybe yours, supporting the legislation, to endorsing it. And I think one reason they're here, let them speak for themselves, is the fact that This is a program that is voluntary but does provide guidance so that building codes will be improved.
Assistant, did you want to add something? Yes, go ahead.
All of you have alluded to the fact that you think that there is a better chance for it to actually become law this year. Can you amplify that? Why is there a better chance? Is there something that's different this year?
Well, the last two, at least when we passed our legislation through in not last Congress, but the Congress before that, it passed overwhelmingly, as Senator Portman said, in the Senate, and it got bogged down in the House. Well, there's new leadership in the House and we think we continue to have the same sponsors of the legislation in the House, but we think it's a more favorable environment to get this done.
I would just add that I think that Congress is very eager to pass a bipartisan bill in the energy domain, and Senators Portman and Shaheen have done such an extraordinary job of reaching out to every stakeholder possible and vetting their bill, incorporating ideas, incorporating bills that other members have introduced, that they have laid the groundwork that usually predicts successful passes.
Yeah, and I would say the obvious, because you heard earlier about a couple of initiatives that Senator Collins has included in this legislation. We reached out to her because she has some great ideas on energy efficiency. So, you know, her fingerprints are on this legislation, as are Senator Manchin's, as you said earlier, with regard to the federal government and the new energy goals. So we've got a lot of buy-in from a lot of different members, and that's one reason we've been able to move the bill forward in the past, and we'll do so again.
Final question.
Have you taken the temperature of the White House on this, and where do they stand? What is the sense you have whether the president would sign anything?
That's your question.
We've talked to them about it, and they're supportive of energy efficiency. In fact, the Secretary of Energy has made that one of his priorities, and we think this would give him additional tools and authorities to go even further. So we look forward to engaging with them, and we're confident that we can, at the end of the day, work as partners with the administration as well.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming. Yeah. Do you have any connections down at the energy department?